SCP-4547 Exterminans. Series B. Title: SCP-4547 Exterminans. Object Class: Apollyon. Author: Storm Breath, that's me. As a warning before I begin, this D-Class is a literary analysis of the work, and not an explainer. The actual article is straightforward, so you should read that before this D-Class. It will be operating under the assumption that you have already read SCP-4547. In this essay, I'll be going over various things that SCP-4547 does and breaking down why they work. The opening of SCP-4547 is a false lead-in. Everything prior to the big reveal is intentionally written in a way to structure the reader's expectations, so that you expect a result entirely different from what actually happens. Some of this is reliant upon wiki tropes, and others are native to the article itself. The name of the article is Exterminans. That's the Latin word for Apollyon, so it's a little joke on that. The one member of the task force is named Abaddon to finish the set-off with the Hebrew word for Apollyon. It evokes the sense of extermination, death, and hopefully, the end of the world. Even from the series list or Crom/Mark/Helen, it should convey a certain sense of gravitas. Object Class: Apollyon. The next example of this is the obvious Object Class, coming in at the 6th word of the SCP. The Apollyon class is often lambasted as a superketer class, which is just an edgy attempt to make the article seem scarier. Here, that's absolutely the case. I want you to go into this with all of your preconceived notions of what an Apollyon is: dangerous, world-ending, and total. It is deadly, and has already ended the world. So now the reader has been primed for an apocalypse reading, and the article works hard to further that belief. The first of these is a very conscious attempt to avoid the mention of the fact that the Tyronyu are alive, at all. You have a few lines such as this. While not inherently anomalous, all Tyronyu currently on the surface of SCP-4547 have become anomalous, with the majority having been converted into SCP-4547b2 Zeta. Which implies that there are no survivors, at least, none that were normal. You have the army of zombies, and perhaps a few vampires, or the like in the mix, which were able to survive. But there are no unaffected survivors. This is furthered later on with the following. Approximately 5 years after the FK-class scenario, the last Tyronyu on the surface of SCP-4547 died. At this point, almost all life on SCP-4547 was dead. The remaining life was predominantly highly anomalous. The description tacitly elides any mention of the status quo, which is that the Tyronyu have escaped Emoera and fled to the Sol system. This is especially noticeable when you think about sources for all of this information. The Foundation had to have Tyronyu employees to write this document, but there's no explicit mention of those in the description, because of the false lead. One of the major things you have to be careful with when writing an article is how and why you use concepts like collapsibles, divs, and block quotes. Every bit that you use should have / some / kind of meaning, or change the way a user reads an article in a way that you've thought about. This article is very conscious of that fact. Take a quick note of what is inside and outside of the collapsibles. Everything before the collapsible sections is set up for the idea that all the Tyronyu are dead, while all of the content that reveals they are alive is within the collapsibles. Footnotes stop when the collapsibles begin. There is only one after, which is relatively vague. Here, the collapsibles and their names obfuscate content as best as they can, as well as prime the reader for tragedy. Because of my choice to collapse the last 4 logs of the draft, when you scroll past the description, you will inevitably see the chapter titles for the ending. I didn't want spoilers, so I tightly restricted and controlled the takeaways. The codenames for the exploratory missions are deliberately dark and pessimistic. Battlefield implies death and conflict, and given the time scales that the SCP establishes in the description 40 years after the fact, this is more likely to be an old, empty battlefield than a hot conflict. Sepulchre means tomb, It invokes the sense of death and funerals. In both cases, the word association is with concepts of the grave and burial. Therefore, you expect that the content that they describe will be something similar. It's entirely opaque what the last two collapsibles will actually contain. The only information you can tell is that something was found, and information regarding it will be released to the public. This doesn't actually inform the reader of anything implicitly. An exploration log will find or reveal something, or else it wouldn't be in the story. And in an open masquerade setting, like Ad Astra per Aspera, the public knowing about the SCP isn't that compelling. The first exploration log is a squad of space marines marching around the planet and finding nothing but desolation. The names of the MTF are of great importance here. All of them are named after a different underworld. By bringing up the names of multiple underworlds in quick succession and constantly repeating them throughout the article, a reader is primed to think of the situation on SCP-4547 as similar. This is a task force that braves the depths of hell and returns. This is what they are currently doing. The onboard AIC is not named Fetch because it returns things, but because it is the living copy of a dead AIC, seen in the cross-linked story. This AIC is a denizen of the underworlds that the MTFs call forth, linking it to the zombies on the planet. Even the zombies of the planet are tired and old, barely able to stand up and crawl towards the MTF. A headless corpse twitches a leg. The rest of the corpse pile begins to move and animate. However, the majority of the corpses have suffered severe bodily trauma, and few are able to stand. Those that cannot stand attempt to pull themselves towards ITF-4. The rest of the log passes without much in the way of tension, since the idea is to emphasize the idea that the apocalypse on this world was so thorough and absolute that even the monsters aren't threats anymore. It's been so long since the world ended that the apocalypses have written over themselves, and there is truly nothing but bones here. A quick aside, but one that ties into the overall themes in the way this was written. There's another misdirection here, which is simpler and quick. Upon turning the corner, ITF-4 sees a large, vaguely reptilian creature. It is four-legged, with a skeletal head not covered in the scales the rest of the creature is. Similarity is noted between this entity and SCP. The entity sniffs the air, before rising from a seated position and walking towards ITF-4. Why does this mention crosslink an article and black box it at the same time? What could possibly be the point of this? Well, the description does its best to imply that the connection that is being made is to the classic big boy, SCP-682. Large, vaguely reptile-like creature is a direct quote from that article, and the physical description is of 682. But the crosslink subverts this. It's a reference to 1124 instead, which are 682 babies. A minor but important distinction. Blackboxing the SCP allows you to assume it is 682 for as long as possible, until it's revealed as 1124. The second log opens with the reader ready for a tomb. The lack of any mention of alien survivors has primed you for it, and there has been no evidence of life. The title of the exploration log goes even further to this extreme, calling the bunker a tomb. By all accounts, the unbreached bunker should be nothing more than that, a failure, just like everything else. You have lines like, a liquid of unknown utility, most likely a disinfectant, is sprayed onto ITF-4, and then washed off. The Foundation knows what this does. The Tyronia told them what it was. There isn't actually a diegetic reason this liquid is unknown. I have no justification. It is a line that blatantly lies to the reader to make a better story. It's purposefully obtuse. The first inklings of hope come when the task force finds out the purpose of the bunker. It's to hold a population of survivors, but it's empty. There's nobody around. The AI welcomes them with open arms as soon as they provide a scrap of information for it. It's desperate to find living individuals again, and it'll take // anybody //. So this is clearly no vault from Fallout, and it doesn't look like the Foundation is going to find anything inside. The big reveal comes soon after that. The reader learns alongside the task force that the aliens are alive, and there are thousands of them within the bunker. What follows next is a dramatic shift in tone and pace, as the Foundation scrambles to save these lives and bring them to the Sol system. For Naraka, yes, I see. My name is Karishma Chutta. This is my commander, Jason Creases, and my teammate, Arthur Penton. We come from a world named Earth. There is a key moment in the log. If the code names of the MTF are meant to evoke the underworld, then their real names, full names, as a normal person would use, represent a shift in focus as well. The planet has gone from a hellscape into a place where there are people, the Turonyu. Scrape away the underworld, look underneath the surface, and what do you find but a person who needs saving? The primary theme of the work is perseverance through hardship. The Turonyu and their planet go through absolute hell, and for a long time, there doesn't seem to be any even remote chance of hope for them or their civilization. But there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and there is eventual salvation for them. The idea is that bad things can happen to you. The worst thing you could have ever imagined, an apocalypse cascade, can roll through your planet. The devastation can be total and complete. The end of everything, unmitigated catastrophe. But that's not a reason to give up. There's still hope out there. The Turonyu survive through their catastrophe and make it to Earth. There is never a question of what to do about them. The choice to give them aid is never doubted by any character. This is an intentional choice of mine in the writing. I didn't want there to be any moral ambiguity in the proper course of action to take, so all of the characters immediately recognize what they have to do and start working at it. The name of the task force in general becomes relevant here. While the names of the task force members were all based upon different underworlds, the title of the group has a different meaning. Fleptera C. Nequimus Suberos. This is a modified and adapted version of Aeneid 7.312, which reads and means Fleptera Si Nequi of Suberos, Acaranta Mutho. If I cannot bend the will of heaven, then I will raise hell. The quotation doesn't appear to mean anything first, and unless you understand Latin or recognize the line from the Aeneid, you'll probably miss it. If you do pick up on it, you'll probably just assume it's a cute reference to the name of the captain. The second half of the quote is finished by the name of Acheron. However, it is when Acheron quotes it at the end that the full meaning becomes apparent. Sometimes, fate has it out for you. Sometimes, the powers that be will destroy your planet and ruin everything. And sometimes, you have to look at them and say fuck you. Make your own way forward, and change your future.